The National Museum of Funeral History presents The Final Curtain Never Closes. I'm your host, Genevieve Keeney Vasquez, the president and CEO of the museum. Welcome to another episode of The Final Curtain Never Closes. Today I'm with a very fascinating guest. And at first, when I tell you who this guest is, you might wonder why is she a guest on The Final Curtain Never Closes. But wait, we have a lot to talk about, and we're going to dive right into it. So I want to welcome Caryn Craig from KW Commercial. She is a commercial realtor. So yeah, a realtor with the National Museum of Funeral History. And we're here to talk about some very interesting stuff that she has encountered during her time as a commercial realtor. So welcome, Caryn.
Thank you, Genevieve. I'm so excited to be here. And talking about cemeteries and land and Texas history is just, to me, it's fascinating. I'm a history buff. And so when I get to couple that with my everyday job, it's the most exciting thing to me.
So you tell me you sell cemeteries?
I don't sell cemeteries.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Cemeteries actually cannot be bought or sold in the state of Texas.
Oh, interesting
They
fact.
cannot. But what I do is when I sell land, I have to make sure that if there is a cemetery on there, it's accounted for and reported, and because sometimes you don't know if they're there. And, for example, I have 15 acres under property in Fayette County right now. And so Fayette County is one of those counties that has cemeteries just dotting their land. And you don't know where they all are because they came from, old settlements, old Texas settlements that maybe are forgotten. Maybe you don't remember there was a church there or a very large home with a family plot. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist. It means they're still there. They've just been forgotten until they're not forgotten.
It's interesting that this topic is being talked about now, especially, Houston has just grown by leaps and bounds.
Yep.
There's been so much development going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was a story recently in the news when they were building a school.
Yes.
And when they
Yes.
started to excavate the land
Yes.
for this property to be developed upon, they came across an old cemetery.
That's right. I think, are you talking about the Sugarland 95
Yes.
in Fort Bend? So that was a huge news story 5 or 6 years ago. And they ended up keeping those people where they were found. And so that did remain consecrated ground. And they were not able to take it from the realm of commerce. That's what they say. So when you find a cemetery like that, like the ones where the Sugarland 95 were found, it's immediately that land is taken from the realm of commerce. It is no longer a subject matter of conveyance, inheritance, so as to interfere with the use and possession that it has been devoted. So
Yes.
It is most of the time in Texas always a cemetery.
We talk about how we have to, once we identify the fact that this was a burial ground and this is sacred, and we have to maintain that as such.
Yes.
I find that very helpful for our listeners if they're ever in the Spring area
Yes.
to have a full understanding of what that looks like. If you go I-45 north and get off right before Old Town Spring,
Yes.
on that feeder road to the left between I-45 and the feeder,
Yep.
there's an actual cemetery.
Yes.
It's the Wenche family cemetery.
Yes.
So if you think about it, that land was so underdeveloped back then.
Yes.
And there undoubtedly was perhaps a church there or maybe
Right.
a family home.
Right.
And they buried their family right there on their land.
And now it's I-45.
Yeah, it's
So,
I-45
I
in the
mean,
feeder.
when you think about that, and, you think about Texas just is constantly being developed. And, isn't the joke about 45 that it's been under construction since the day it started?
Exactly.
And it wasn't always like this. This
Yeah.
is a place where people settled.
It's interesting because my husband and I, he was checking his phone last night and he said, I found a picture of back when they were barely starting I-45 at Conroe.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just tons and tons of trees just everywhere. And then you just seen this small little clearing that I could now recognize as, oh, wow, that's going to be 45. And it was just a dirt clearing at the time.
Right.
It was
Right.
interesting. But yeah,
Right.
the history is profound in Texas and it is everywhere. But I think that we're finding in this vast land of Texas that there are more and more forgotten cemeteries throughout that have been overgrown and no longer cared for. And like you said, perhaps was just a family plot on somebody's land, because in the state of Texas, you can bury on your property, providing that you get that registered with the state that you are going to bury a family member. And of course, it can't be done within city limits.
Right, not anymore.
Yes. So we have to, there are laws that govern where you can and cannot bury, but for the most part, in our fine state of Texas, you can be buried on your land.
That's right. That's right. And, you just said something you said vegetation. So it's interesting when you go and you do this research and you look at, what is my client purchasing? How do you identify a cemetery? How do you find out that one's there?
15 acres, how do you know there's a cemetery?
How do you figure it out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because history gets lost and it gets forgotten. And not everything is written down. And maybe if it was written down, that got lost or forgotten.
Well, and also, we're prone to hurricanes.
Yes.
And all this flooding that we've experienced over the years. Undoubtedly, perhaps, we had one of our county offices and all the records that were in it was just wiped out.
Right.
So how do you find out if a cemetery once existed in this vast land that you're trying to sell when there's no records to tie back to it?
So it's interesting. You can walk the land and you can.
So did you go walk 15 acres?
No, I didn't. I'll be honest with you. There's cattle on the land and I didn't want to disturb the cows. So, you can walk land and there's things you can find. Obvious signs are going to be headstones that come up out of the ground. But then there were some eras where they put headstones on the bottom, like, the ones that just lie flat. There were some times where perhaps a family didn't have a lot of money and they just put other things there.
A wooden cross, perhaps?
A wooden cross, which would probably be gone at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
Different types of rocks that might be in an unnatural formation. But the biggest part, well, there's two, are the pathways through a forest. If they're unnatural, you have to think something's there. Sometimes the flat headstones get buried, and so they'll create mounds. So you can look and you can see if what's going on there. Maybe you want to wipe that off. You can see a lot of this through aerial footage as well. So we're lucky that we're in the era of, Google Earth.
Yes.
And, as realtors, we have some other software and programs that we can use to, really search aerial footage. But the part of it that is the most amazing to me is the foliage. So things like hibiscus and other hostas are not native to Texas, but it's what people used to use to decorate cemeteries. Daffodils are another part. Daffodils, if you put them in the ground and they are undisturbed, they will proliferate. Eventually, those bulbs will proliferate. So if you're walking through a forest in Texas and you see a bunch of daffodils, there's a good reason why they're there. You should question it.
Perhaps somebody had laid daffodils at a grave site sometime many, many years ago.
Yes, and this is how they decorated where their family member was buried. Other irises, certain types of iris are not native to Texas. And then, of course, lilies.
Very interesting. I would have never thought. So for myself, I'm in the industry myself, but of course I'm in it to a completely different facet. I'm not in it looking to see, was this once a cemetery? I know where the cemeteries are and I know where they're headed, right? Because I'm a funeral professional.
Right.
So it's very interesting that to see somebody who's not in the industry, but is one that is in the market of selling land and has to understand that before you sell that land, you have to determine if it was something else prior to it getting developed. So let's hypothetically speak and say that this 15 acres you find perhaps a marked cemetery where there's several bodies or just a cemetery where there's one.
Right.
What do you do? What is your responsibility at that point?
Well, you have to obviously alert the county. The county has to be aware this is what's here. And then there's other government agencies that take over after that, but you have to let them know that it's there.
Of course.
Because, that has happened here in Texas sometimes where you try to hide it. You can't hide it. That's not how it goes. And so, for some people that would be a turnoff. They wouldn't want land that had a cemetery on it. And that's understandable because you have to provide walkable access to that cemetery so people can go and visit it, which means, depending on where it is, people are going to be walking on your land.
Oh, wow.
Now, you don't have to have drivable access. You have to have walkable access.
Interesting. Now, are you going to be responsible for the care of the cemetery as well if it's in your land?
You are.
Wow. So you have to provide that perpetual care.
You do.
Wow. So I have to keep cutting the grass and weeding and making sure the cemetery is.
Yep.
Interesting.
It is interesting. And, for some people that would be a turnoff. For other people, they'd be like, this is really cool.
Well, if I was in the industry,
this.
and I mean, I'm in the industry, so I think if I ended up with a cemetery on my land, I think it would be quite fascinating. Actually, I'd be honored to actually care for that cemetery and ensure that the descendants of that cemetery continue to have a place to come and visit and learn about their loved ones. Because, we were talking earlier, the whole purpose of the cemetery is one to leave your mark in this world, right? To show that you true in fact actually existed at one time.
Yes.
You lived a life, and that life that you lived, led to other lives.
Yes.
And we always hope that that you don't have to experience that second death that we consider happens when the last person who knows who you are no longer is there to visit your grave.
Right.
And so the cemeteries are important, but you touched on some other aspects of why a cemetery is so important.
Well, I think it's our Texas history. And when you look at the development in Texas, we're expanding into small little towns. I mean, look at Katy, for example. Katy, even 25 years ago, was not what Katy is now. But when you drive through the older areas of Katy, there are cemeteries dotted in there. And those were people's lives. People lived there. They loved there. They developed the town that we now know. They were the
Which
first
we're turning
ones.
into probably a little city now, right?
And I think it's you can definitely argue that Katy is a city, but you go further, let's go further out on I-10. Let's just go further out on I-10. You have these small little towns. They were railroad towns. They were there for a reason. And so they're getting swallowed up. Mm-hmm. And so the way to preserve that is to make sure that we're preserving our history. And part of that is cemeteries, because there are a lot of towns in Texas that don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's where you find these little surprises, like I like to call them, where you're buying land and you find these little surprises that are there because the town didn't need to exist anymore. Whatever they were doing there moved somewhere else. And so everybody else did. But their loved ones remained.
Yes, those that died in that small town,
Yes.
that town defined who they were,
Yes.
are now left behind.
Exactly. But that's our history.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of Texas.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
It's interesting that we try to hold on to the cemeteries as best as possible. I remember being involved in a project here locally in Houston off of I-10, Olivewood Cemetery.
Oh, yes.
That cemetery truly got swallowed up in development.
Oh, yeah.
There's townhomes and shopping strips and everything all around it now. I remember helping them try and, with the project, preserve Olivewood. And we actually were able to get the mayor to come out and proclamate an Olivewood Day from our efforts. And they always are in need of volunteers to come out and help clean off the vegetation and help preserve the cemetery. And it was unfortunate in some of our mini storms that we have here in Houston with all of the development created a wash off of large amounts of water. And unfortunately, Olivewood became a subject of that wash off, and it washed away graves. Yeah. And it was disheartening to learn of that. And I believe still today they're trying to find where these caskets and headstones, where did they wash off to? Being able to match back the headstone to the bones that they found, they may never be able to. But it goes to show that the things we do today have a profound effect on the history that was left behind.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's important that we take responsibility for these cemeteries and ensure that what we're doing today is not going to wash that away.
Right.
Literally.
Well, because we're seeing it. Mm-hmm. We're seeing it. And we could go into Galveston and talk about Galveston.
Galveston has some beautiful cemeteries.
Really do. We could talk about Galveston all day long and how they have had to deal with that issue.
Yes.
The flooding and, land that just doesn't exist anymore because it's gone because of, whatever reason. But, I'll go back again to our small little Texas railroad towns. Mm-hmm. and just making sure we preserve that history. I'm from the Northeast, and it's different there. You drive through Staten Island, the Bronx, and you see these massive cemeteries that are world famous that you see in movies, and they're still there.
Yeah.
Now, from a real estate perspective, that is extremely expensive land.
Oh, of course. But back then it wasn't.
Back then it wasn't.
You
Back
know?
then it was in the country. Mm-hmm. But now it's not. That is extremely expensive land. And so you have that conundrum, for lack of a better word. We have all this land. Some people would want to make that choice to move them to build their skyscrapers and their high rises, but it's part of the landscape.
And I'm so thankful that we have the rules and the regulations in place to help protect that sacred land. It's important. It's interesting. I lived in Europe for 6 years. And during my time there, I had the distinct honor to work with some of the local nationals who worked in the cemeteries. And I learned that their land isn't vast like ours. Right. And their land is agricultural. It's used to farm and provide the substance for the people that are living. So burial land is very, very scarce there. Wow. And what you actually do is you actually rent the space. You will continuously pay. Your family members will continuously pay. It's not one per plot. It's usually 6 to 8 per plot within that family. Of people, yes.
How long is the lease for?
As long as the lease is for as long as the last person in the family who's willing to pay the rent.
Oh my goodness.
And once that last person passes away of the family, there's no one there to pay the rent, or there's no one left in the family to come and visit the gravesite. So what they do is they will unearth all of the family members, and then they get buried in a mass grave that's in the cemetery.
Oh my goodness.
And then that now piece of land is open for another family to occupy. So, we're pretty fortunate that we have the land that we have to be able to use it for cemeteries, where there's a lot of countries that don't have that same option.
Texans, I don't think would like that very much.
No.
I can't see that working in our culture.
No, I don't see it. But culturally, it's an acceptance over there. It's,
right.
It's part of their
there's
practice.
No choice.
Yeah, there's no choice.
There's no choice. It's not like here.
Exactly.
Where you drive and drive and drive. And we have nothing but land here. Exactly. That is very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. I think I told you earlier, the last paper I did for my master's degree was on the death services industry. And it was 100 pages of basically burial rituals and how they're changing and how they have to change. Because, for example, look at New York City. Mm-hmm. There is no more land to put cemeteries. It's not like Texas. It's very crowded there. And so, what do you do there?
Cremate.
You do cremate. That's right. You do cremate.
Yeah, you have to in order to provide that. And it was interesting. I was talking to someone when I was at convention a couple weeks ago, and they're from China. And they were talking about this, and I kid you not, I saw it in a sci-fi movie. And then to hear somebody actually talking about it in a lecture as it's coming to true existence in our lifetime.
I can't wait to hear the story. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
Is that they because they do cremation there because, their land and their population is way beyond New York, right? So what they do is they're doing vertical cemeteries, if you will.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the structure is vertical and it goes up into the sky. And then what you do is you will put the urn into this box, and it'll go basically kind of like up an elevator, if you will, and then it'll get deposited into the niche space that has been built vertically upward. So it's way up there into the sky, if you will. And then if you want to visit your loved one, then you punch the number of your loved one's niche space, and the little elevator will go up and pick up their urn, and then it'll bring it down to them. And then there's a video about them, a hieroglyphic video about that person that you've taken during their lifetime in their bank. And then their cremated remains are there with you, and the hologram comes to life on the screen, and then you sit there and engage with them on a video screen. And then when you're done, you just, I guess you just collect click that you're done, and then their urn goes back up into the niche space that's somewhere up in the high sky in the building that they've created.
So it's like a high-rise mausoleum.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yes.
I feel like I'm going to have big feelings on this because no, it's just a no. It's just a no.
Well, if you can't bury in the ground and you can't go down, you got to go up.
Well, I guess that's yes, but that
what
just
a
seems very
concept.
impersonal.
You're sending your loved one up into the sky, like to the heavens.
Some people would like that, like Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah,
didn't he want his ashes to be in space? And maybe they are.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so I'm also a Star Trek nerd, so that's kind of cool. But
yeah,
I guess this is what my children and grandchildren will be faced with.
It will,
but it seems very impersonal and not loving to me.
Yeah,
it seems.
Well, it's not what we are culturally enriched with. It's not our culture. It's not our history. And so it's the future. And sometimes we have a hard time adapting to the future, adapting to the change. I would say probably 2 generations below you and I won't have any problems with it. They'll think it's cool and it's part of their upbringing.
Oh yeah, like I said, my grandchildren, they're going to be like, "Grandma, you're so old. I can't believe you don't think this is cool."
Exactly. Yeah, it's a cool.
Don't do this to me, grandchildren. Don't do this to me.
They're going to be like, "Wait,
I have big
we're going
feelings.
to put you up into the sky.
I know where I want to be, and it's not there." Well, that is very, 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 very interesting.
So, that just helps to solve the land issue, right?
It does. It does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. But what does that do for our history? How do we remember ourselves?
The history is captured in the hologram that they've recorded.
What happens if you have a power outage?
Well, then that's going to be another issue.
It's a good question.
Exactly.
That's a good question. What happens if there's a power outage?
You'll just have to wait for the power to come back on.
I can't deal with that. That's just very stressful. That's just not, no. It's a no.
And if you think about it, we're going to be relying more and more on technology to do what we need to do in life.
I think we're already there.
Yeah, whether it's visiting our loved ones at their gravesite or their burial spot or their niche space or our day-to-day life. You're right. We're already there.
We are.
And we're going to I think we'll have a hard time adapting with more and more power outages in the future.
I mean, I just told you earlier, my kids had a really hard time having the power out for a few hours the other night. And I was like, this is great.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to read a book. This is so fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun. But I don't know. I think preserving our history is the most important thing that we can do.
Well, we were talking earlier also about the Civil War and the Civil War and reenactments and stuff, and how we try to keep history alive, right? By stepping out of the history books and bringing forth actual live events that we have around our city. And Civil War reenactments has been something that the museum has been involved with year over year. There's several of them throughout the year that we go and we set up basically Dr. Thomas Holmes' embalming tent and what it was like to embalm the soldiers during the Civil War while the battle is happening in front of us for people to witness. So like you say, it's very interesting and important to look back at our history, to know where we came from and make sure we don't make the mistake twice. But historically, I was asking you if you knew about Patterson Road that's here also over off I-10 going towards Katy. Have you heard of Patterson Road?
I have not.
Well, I learned that there was a battle that happened in that area as well. And when I first came here, of course, all of my friends, when they found out I was coming here to go to Commonwealth Institute of Funeral Services and be an undertaker, they were like, "Oh, we're going to take you to Patterson Road." And I'm like, "What's Patterson Road?" They're like, "It's haunted." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, let's go." So
she's like, "This is for me."
So it's interesting. We went out there, and at first, I'm not going to lie, I'm afraid of the dark. I just, if I walk through the area while it's lit and I can get familiar with the area before it gets dark, then I'm okay because that's just how I am. But if I'm going into a new area and it's completely pitch dark, then forget it. It's like the ibby-jibbies start to happen and my hair starts to stand up. So there's this bridge that they supposedly say if you park your car on the bridge that you could actually see fingerprints on your window and somebody coming out. And we had a lot of people with us, so I felt safe in the numbers, right? And we were in the truck. We all got out of the back of the pickup truck, and then we stood on the bridge, and we were just waiting for something. And all of a sudden, just this whiff of gunpowder smell came across me, and I have a very uncanny sense of smell that drives me crazy sometimes. And I could smell it, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and someone in the group just kind of like made a like somebody touched her. So she screamed, and she ran off the bridge, and I ran off the bridge after her, and I was like, okay, I'm not going back. And we were taking pictures. We had a camera back then. This was before cell phones. And we had a digital camera, and we were taking pictures, and we started seeing these little orbs. And people talk about orbs, and that you can see them, and they kind of look like I always think they're like an Aztec calendar kind of sort of look to me. And I was studying the cameras and realizing that, the orb that was further away was bigger than the orb that was in the forefront. And I was like, if you think about that, the physics of that should have been the opposite.
The opposite, right.
And so it was actually displaying different levels of energy. And so that was my first time experiencing the orb and experiencing some type of, powers or ghosts, spirits beyond me. I couldn't see anything without a digital camera, but I could smell. And then, of course, we were there for a couple hours, and then the cops came out and said, "Are you all parked at the gas station over there?" And we're like, "How did you know it was us?" He was like, "We were on the plate. We figured you guys were a big group of people. You must be
funny.
You must be ghost hunting on Patterson Road."
That's funny.
He came, and then, of course, I had to ask him. I was like, "Are there really ghosts on Patterson Road?" And he's like, "I will not confirm nor deny." And I was like, "Oh, man, I'm sure you get it a lot."
Maybe he's in denial.
Yeah.
Could be in denial.
But I'm sure, so that, I know that tract of land will never be developed because it's prone to flooding a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting. So, for listeners, that if you want an adventure, go out to the bridge on Patterson Road.
That's right in our area.
Pretty interesting.
That is very, very, very interesting.
Yeah. But they say a battle was fought there, and there's a lot of soldiers that died there. So that their remains still there. But, the area is so overgrown with vegetation that it would just take, eons to even try to find anything.
Interesting. Interesting, because I went to college in Civil War country, so, you could find bullets sometimes if you were digging, and like deep in Virginia.
And in New York, too, they had imploded a building, I heard, and then as they were excavating the earth, they didn't realize that building was actually built on an old Civil War cemetery.
Oh, wow.
Because they were unearthing the Fisk coffins that they were in. And so a Fisk coffin is this heavy iron coffin, and it has a glass plate around the face.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And we actually have some here in the museum that you can see, but they're heavy because they're all made of iron. But they were used to get the soldiers that died during the Civil War, get their remains returned home, especially mostly up north.
Right.
And that was a long travel for them, so they needed to be in this container that could contain all of the bodily fluids and stuff.
Well, what's interesting about that is I don't think of the Civil War as being a very long time ago. Especially in New York, I think of it as being constant commerce and records and things being written down. So to have that, because we were talking about Trinity Church earlier, which is centuries before the Civil War. And so you think about that, like, how did they build on top of the cemetery? How did they do that? How did they not know?
Yeah,
How did they not know?
And it makes you wonder, where did the records go?
Yes.
Or where's their knowledge, but it was suppressed, and they just said,
maybe it wasn't important. And that's sad.
It is, yeah.
That's sad.
So I think that the takeaway today truly is that, if you're eager to build on land, build on family land, or build on land that you buy from somebody else, that it's important to ensure that somebody isn't buried there.
Right.
And so that, because once you build upon it, they're forgotten forever.
Right. And I think, once, say you do find plots on land that you want to buy, when you purchase that land, you also have that responsibility. You have the responsibility to upkeep our Texas history.
Yes, definitely. And Texas, we're all about our history.
We are all about our history, and we can't let it go away.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very important element to bring to the table. And I never, sometimes we get tunnel vision and we don't think outside the box enough, especially myself. But I think this is a very, very important conversation.
Agreed.
Always to be had. And if you are in the commercial real estate business, this definitely is something for you to listen to and learn more about if you don't know enough about it.
Right.
So if, let's say I came across a plot of land and I want to make sure, can I contact you?
Of course you can.
Is there somebody else I need to reach?
No, of course you can contact me.
So if I wanted to, how can I reach you?
You can reach me via cell phone, 713-398-2839. I'm Caryn Craig, Realtor, on everything, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And my name is spelled different. It's spelled Caryn.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out.
Yes. Yes, I say I'm a Caryn, not a Karen. But you can find me on socials. CarynCraig.com is my personal website, and that's how you can contact me. But if anybody's buying or selling land in Texas, this is an important part of that.
Yes, definitely. Because it's important for people to know what they're buying.
It is.
And that we preserve the history that goes along with it. And so, thank you so much for being a resource for people out there.
Problem.
Thank you for coming and being part of this amazing podcast that we have to constantly inform people on different aspects of our industry, as well as the most important part of life, which is death.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Genevieve. You're great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining me today on this podcast, and I hope that you will share this episode with family and friends. We look forward to any feedback you have to offer by giving us a review on Apple or Spotify. And always remember, any day above ground is a good one.